this is my presentation on memory and its effects on history. So, one of the stimulus sources that I used was The False Nostalgia by Johan Norberg, and he mentioned at the very end of the text that we often confuse personal nostalgia with the historical source. With that, he's diving into, we see our nostalgia and our memories as history and how it happened, even though that's how we see it. It may not have happened that way, but that is still how each individual views history. It's through their own personal views. So collective memory, I really dove into collective memory and personal memory. So collective memory is the memory that people and groups share. So that can extend anywhere from a friend group all the way up to having an entire nation having this collective memory, which it can have these false ideas in it, like a nation can see themselves as the greatest nation on the planet, and everybody in that nation sees it that way, even though that may not be as true. And personal memory is just the memory everybody has as an individual that can be shared through collective memory, but it tends to just stay to the single individual. Which led me to my research question, is personal or collective memory more harmful to the preservation of an accurate history? And I found throughout my research that that collective memory's impact outweighed personal memory's impact by a significant amount. So this quote from Suparna Rajim, a cognitive psychologist and expert in psychology, found that collective memory has also been implicated in shaping autobiographical memories at historic, cultural, and familial levels. It just extends quite a ways and has a fairly large effect on how people view history and how that history has been affected. Well, and it affects that history because several people understand that history. And then historian Patrick Hutton found that today's challenge to the saga of modern history is a changing perspective on historical time, which has been it leads to people, like COVID is a great example of this. It's been found that people have had a differing sense of time after COVID. Like everybody feels like time is moving significantly faster, and therefore it's changing their view on history. It's affecting a lot of people, leading to this collective memory of this changing time and how it's progressing significantly faster. And then Andrei Sketsky, a professor at the Australian National University, found that communities also construct narratives of self-interpretation, which it's self-interpreted. It's not necessarily always true. It can have fallacies. Specifically, they see more positive and less negative than there actually is, as everybody does, and it's this communal memory and this communal knowledge that has developed, leading to this collective memory and affecting that community's history. That community's history is definitely going to be different than a history written from somebody who's outside, who's watched the entire thing, versus somebody who's in that community, who's been a part of it, has seen it in that way, and from that first person perspective. So, continuing, Andrei Sketsky also found that the consequence of the modernization is the dissolution of culture, of unified common memory, which has changed the way that people relate to the past. And it's pretty much saying that this common memory that is shared among individuals, this collective memory, is changing how people view the past. It's changing how people relate to the history, And it's leading to a lot of fallacies in history because people are changing how they're relating to the past versus how the past actually was. So, some of the counter arguments from Judith Binney's Maori Oral Histories, also one of the stimulus materials. I found that the telling of history, whether it be oral or written, has not and will never be neutral. It has always reflected the priorities of the narrators and their perception of the world. And it's pretty much saying that a historian's memory of an event can have an effect on how that historian is presenting that event to the public as a historical fact. And it's just human nature to insert our own perspectives in everything that we say and we do. And even though it's not possible, it's not possible to remove that perspective completely, but removing it to an extent is always the goal. Also, renowned psychologists Kate McLean and Dan McAdams found that the autobiographical past imagines the future in such a way to provide a person's life with some degree of unity, purpose, and meaning. This pretty much saying that an individual's memory can be more affected. Well, I found that it can be more affected than the collective memory because people always try to give their life some meaning, to provide a degree of unity and purpose into their own personal memories. And also, Stephen J. Frenda, a professor at one of the California universities, I'm forgetting which one, but he found that people sometimes recall entire events and experiences that never happened, and these false memories can be vivid, emotional, and held with great confidence. This is an extremely difficult thing to happen with collective memory because there's several people that are remembering it. They're not just going to remember these false images. But while this individual memory is significantly more affected by these fallacies and misinformation, collective memory still will hold a greater impact because it's affecting significantly more people with that specific memory. So, overall, the collective memory's impact, it impacts more people, easily spreads through modern media, and completely changes how the past is viewed.
How did you select the strategies that you used to gather information or conduct research, and what was effective versus ineffective?
I found that searching for very specific information, like exactly how collective memory and exactly how individual memory affects history, was extremely hard to find. And so I had to find broader information, like about collective memory in general, which then had information on, like small parts of information on how it affects history, but largely on how it works. Same with individual memory.
And what advice would you have for other researchers who consider this topic?
It is it's a super interesting topic. I really enjoyed researching it. Specifically finding these connections between individual and collective memory was a big struggle for me. I didn't find a whole lot on that, and difficult to research specifically that connection.